Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be making a Toadstool fairy house lantern using a jar and polymer clay. All the materials with links will be in the description. For this project you're going to need a simple jar. Now this can be bought or a recycled sauce jar. Spread a thin layer of Fimo liquid on the jar so that the clay sticks to the glass and wrap it with a sheet of white polymer clay. I try to smooth the clay down as I go so as to reduce the chances of getting air bubbles. If you open the jar you'll be able to see the bubbles, and if that's the case you can make small slits in the clay and push the air out. Trim the excess clay and blend the seams. Remember not to cover the neck of the jar or you won't be able to screw the lid on. Cover the base of the jar with clay as well, so when you look inside it's all nice and white. To avoid getting air bubbles, try pushing the clay from the centre outward. Trim the excess clay and blend the joints. I pressed a snake of white clay around the base to make it wider and blended it to the clay underneath with a bowl tool and my fingers. To make the windows I used round cutters in two different sizes, but you can also cut them out with a knife in different shapes. I cut the shape of the door out with a knife and used a cotton bud dipped in acetone to clean the glass. To cut small spy holes for the fairies to look through, I used a straw. I used a toothbrush to texture the clay, both stippling and brushing down at the same time to get textured lines. Then I baked the jar for 15 minutes. Next I added the door made from brown polymer clay, bonding it to the glass with Fimo liquid. I textured the clay using a small bowl tool and a needle tool. I added texture with a toothbrush and used a needle tool to create holes in the wood. I spread Fimo liquid around the door to add a frame. Remember to add some sort of liquid clay when bonding baked and unbaked polymer clay so that they stick. I also added clay around the windows, but I blended the edges with the clay underneath. To make pebbles on the doorstep, I simply rolled out small balls of polymer clay in two shades of grey and pressed them against the clay. I think it looks nicer if you make them in different sizes and shapes. I made lots more pebbles and baked them for 10 minutes so I could push them into the clay around the door. I also added pebbles of similar size above the windows. I baked the jar again for about 10 or 15 minutes. To create the structure of the top of the toadstool I used tin foil. I first covered the lid in a sheet of beige clay, bonding with Fimo liquid. I spread more Fimo liquid to bond the tinfoil structure. Next I wrapped snakes of tinfoil around the bottom edge of the lid to make it wider. To make the tinfoil stay put while I added more tinfoil and clay, I sandwiched clay in between the layers. and to hold the ends down I used small pieces of clay. Next, I covered the whole thing with one sheet of tin foil. I spread a thin layer of Fimo liquid on the tin foil to add a sheet of polymer clay, and this can be in any colour because it's only going to be a base to make the surface smoother for the red clay. I didn't want to add a sheet of red clay straight away because I didn't want all the bumps of the tin foil to show. But of course this is optional and you could use another sheet of tin foil if you wanted to. Then I added the sheet of red polymer clay, filling in any gaps, trimming off the excess and smoothing down all the joints. After baking it for 15 minutes, I added bits of white clay on the top, texturing them with a pointy dotting tool. This was one of my favourite things, but I feel I should tell you that it took me about 2 to 3 hours to cover the whole roof, and that's excluding the chimneys and window. A lot of people ask me how long it takes me to complete these jars, but it depends on the jar and how much detail I'm adding to them. Also, filming and several baking stages or painting stages can slow me down. I can't say how much time exactly I spent on this jar, but it was roughly 9 hours for about 3 days, and that includes the baking, painting and drying stages. To make the window I used translucent clay and red for the roof, which I blended onto the baked clay underneath. I made the chimneys from white polymer clay and pressed them against one side of the roof, always bonding with Fimo liquid. Then I poked a hole in the top using a pointy tool. I added beige clay to the underside of the lid and used a needle tool to create the lines. To soften the clay, you can use a small brush dipped in liquid clay or baby oil. After baking the roof again, I added the last few touches and covered the chimneys with red clay. To make plants or moss growing on the toadstool, I first spread Fimo liquid on the areas I want the moss to be and then add little bits of green clay. Using a pointy dotting tool, I poke the clay to create tiny holes and break through the edges. You can do this any way you want, remembering to keep the neck of the jar clay free. For bigger areas, I like pressing a snake of clay against the jar and shape it with my fingers first, then texture it with the dotting tool. When you're happy with the look, bake it again. Once baked and cool, I made the door hinges and nails using black clay. I also made a handle with an antique bronze jump ring and black clay. Then I baked it one last time. I added a generous amount of glaze on the top window and dusted white glitter dust to make it look as if something magical is happening in there. I used acrylic paints to add more details like shadows and highlights. On the door I used black paint, blotting the excess with a tissue. And I used white to create highlights. I cleaned the windows with acetone again and used PBO's vitriol paint in yellow to add colour to both the windows and spy holes. On the top window I only added a small amount of turquoise paint. Then I glazed it, and that was my Toadstool fairy house done. To light up the house at night I recommend using an LED tea light, which is totally safe and won't darken your glass or polymer clay with prolonged use. They also come in different colours, which will make your fairy house look even more magical. If you liked this tutorial, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. You might also want to check out my other jar tutorials like my witch house or hobbit hole, and if you have any requests, please leave them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, have a crafty weekend, and I'll see you all next time. Bye! Ciao ciao! Mwah!